Hello again. He is the Hall of Famer Mike Scheck. I am Tripp Rogers. We are the Fantasy Sultans coming up on week number 6 in the NFL. And of course, this week, another week with buys. And you may look at your roster as somebody who I'm helping looked at the roster and said, what are we going to do with the buys? And of course, I looked at my roster last week. What are we going to do with the buys? And Mike looked at his roster last week and said, I'm the Hall of Famer. I took care of the buys. I don't have to worry about this. Week number 6, Kansas City is on a bye. So are the Rams, the Miami Dolphins, and the Minnesota Vikings. Now, the thing about that is that covers a number of key fantasy players and key fantasy pieces. So hopefully you'll listen to us and make some moves before we get into week 6. And I'll review that again, but we have to talk about what happened this week. The New York Jets are the New York Jets, and they fired their head coach. What are the fantasy implications of that? Well, I don't know. Everybody loves the Jets defense, but now the guy who's the defensive coordinator is the head coach. I don't know about that. And I just think this is the Jets. In a nutshell, this is the Jets. Let's fire the head coach. Let's not have a plan B. We'll make the defense coordinator interim. Your problem's the offense, you morons.
Yeah. And from a fantasy implication, Breece Hall was a huge pick for a lot of people who drafted him early. I mean, he went as early as maybe top 3 in some leagues, maybe top 5, whatever the case may be. Had a nice performance to start the season and then kind of dropped off. He's only had 5 PPR points over the past few weeks, and that is just not getting it done for anybody.
Garrett Wilson. Let's not forget Garrett Wilson, because he was also first round draft in the fantasy drafts, and he hasn't really done anything. I mean, who is Aaron's favorite receiver? What's his name from the Packers? Alan whatever. But
Alan Lazard,
yeah, Lazard. And I'm like, hello, Garrett Wilson. Hello, he's the guy.
Who's his favorite wide receiver? That would be Davante Adams.
Now,
we don't know if he's going to get or not, because
and that's
there's still a lot of trade implications.
That's the other part of the machinations now. Do the Jets go out and get Davante Adams? He is not going to play once again. If you got him, you're putting him on your bench, and he is not going to play. Of course, Let's talk about the Raiders. But I think we knew this going in. Quarterback hell in Las Vegas. They're going to go with Aiden O'Connell. They're going to pull Gardner Minshew. Minshew mania, not happening. He's been pulled the last 2 games. So I just kind of wonder if, and I don't want to say, I don't want to tip off our import exports too, but I think we were both not really high on Raiders stock this year. And one of the reasons is the quarterback play. And number 2, listen, Antonio Pierce, good guy. But I don't know about him as head coach. I just don't know. But that's another story. Again, import exports. Again, you got buys this weekend. There's some big buys. Kansas City, no Patrick Mahomes. Rams, Cooper Kupp may come back after the bye. That's a good thing. But no Matt Stafford. Miami, no Tyreek Hill. Devon Achane had a concussion. He is now questionable for next week. And Minnesota, of course, Sam Darnold.
Oh, yeah.
Got to believe he really felt good about that game. Beat the Jets, baby. Beat the Jets, who cast me aside and said, no good. So, but in Minnesota also, Justin Jefferson not playing this week. So you got to fill some holes. That's what we're going to do. Import exports. Hall of Famer, go first.
All right, and I will start it up with Minnesota. Speaking of Ty Chandler, running back. He could be the future hottest commodity on the waiver wire this week as he took over for the injured Aaron Jones in London. Now, he only carried the ball 14 times for 30 yards, but his role could increase if Jones's hip issue is much more serious. Of course, now we don't know how the injury is going to impact the Vikings until after their week bye this week. But of course, Chandler is worth the pickup if Jones misses a game or two, and he wouldn't be a bad handcuff either if Jones does return to the lineup given the injury. All right, moving on. I told you about an Indianapolis wide receiver who would get an uptick in performance. That was Josh Downs last week. Yeah, he had 15 PPR points. Well, I've got another one in Indy, Alec Pierce. He's a deep threat. He caught a 65-yard touchdown on 3 receptions for 134 yards. Josh Downs, well, he's a guy for the Colts, but Pierce is a decent, nice pickup there. As long as Joe Flacco's under center, those wide receivers will be rolling for Indianapolis. Finally, you need a tight end who won't stink like cheese. Pick up Tucker Kraft of Green Bay. The Packers tight end, he scored twice last Sunday to go along with his 4 catches for 88 yards. Of course, played a larger role with Christian Watson and Romeo Dow. Romeo Dow's out last week with injuries, but he's definitely a trusted target for Jordan Love moving forward in the Packers passing game, and that's more important than ever, being that Green Bay is down to a few good men. All right, export. And you talked about the Raiders. We weren't high on them. Well, I drafted one Raider in this league, and boy, does he Raider. That would be Zamir White. And he played the first 4 weeks of the season, struggled to generate momentum, just averaging 3.1 yards per carry, no scores. White missed last week with a groin injury, and while Alexander Madison didn't really set the world on fire, it seems like Antonio Pierce is looking like a backfield committee. He's kind of favoring the veteran a little bit. So right now, I think the Raiders' backfield is a frustrating timeshare. At this point, I would say probably better to cut him in favor of somebody who's better on the waiver wire who can get you more points. Maybe somebody like a Tyrone Tracy Jr. Want another export? Well, whether or not you send them to waivers or you keep them on your bench, he did not perform last week. Geno Smith in Seattle. Seemed like a very good, favorable start last week against the Giants in week 5. Not really, because the Giants defense came up big. 284 yards, just 1 touchdown, 1 pick. Expectations high, of course, after Geno's performance against Detroit, 395 yards. Faces San Francisco on Thursday Night Football, and I'll tell you what, that is tough sledding. He has the Falcons, Bills, Rams, and then another date with the 49ers. Not a favorable schedule upcoming. Export him, or if you can afford the roster space, keep him on your bench. But, of course, I would not start him.
I think at this point, and just to throw that in about Geno Smith, there's really no reason to carry two quarterbacks.
No.
Unless you're, again, you've got, unless you happen to have Josh Allen and CJ Stroud, like somebody did in our Best Buy league, drafted them first. No, you don't need to. Once you're past the bye, you can get rid of your quarterback. Now, Geno Smith, again, you have Geno, you may want to spot start him. Okay. Let's move on to my import exports. I'm going to first go with imports. Listen, Patrick Mahomes sitting this week, Matthew Stafford sitting this week, Sam Darnold sitting this week. Tua is still out, but that goes without saying. How about a quarterback? How about Justin Fields? Now, he didn't do great Monday morning. But then again, he didn't throw a pick on Sunday night and Monday morning. So there you go. Justin Fields with Pittsburgh. I know Russell Wilson is getting ready. That's why I'm saying if you're looking for a quarterback this week in week 6, Justin Fields will be a guy. He's available in leagues. I think you might want to grab him because, again, you don't need to carry 2 quarterbacks unless you have a quarterback bye coming up. Justin Fields will be a guy to get. Okay, waiver wire running back. You kind of hit on it a little bit. And the one guy who is available and was a beast last week. He was the top point scorer, and he has basically uh, really made the Jacksonville backfield a committee, but he's getting more of the work. Tank Bigsby, if you have
Mm-hmm.
not grabbed him, I mean, he's available in a lot of leagues. And last week was his coming out party. Go to the waiver wire, get him, import him, because it looks like, again, part of it is Travis Etienne is the other one I'm talking about, is banged up. And Jacksonville has not done well, and the quarterback has not done well. But Tank Bigsby was the guy last week, and they now have, again, Jacksonville plays Chicago this week. That's going to be a tough matchup because Chicago's defense is really good. But I think Tank Bigsby is the guy who's going to set the tone in this backfield. So he's a guy you definitely want to import and import now. Okay. You mentioned Tyrone Tracy. I agree. He has surprised me. And as a New York Giant fan, he really did a great job last week. Devin Singletary was out last week. He shined in his replacement. He's a guy you want to pick up, especially if you have Devin Singletary on your roster, because, again, he's the backup and he could get you some points. And, again, look to spot start him. All right, moving on. We'll go to wide receivers. And, and it's funny you're saying this. Juju Smith-Schuster goes back to Kansas City, and he's kind of the forgotten man in the receiver lineup because of everybody they have. But they've had some injuries, and what's old is new again. Kareem Hunt, Juju Smith-Schuster. He's a guy you want to grab. And again, the Chiefs are off this week, but he's available. I would get him, especially as you go down the road. Now, let's talk about Dumpsville. These are the exports I'm going to talk about this week. One of them, Demarcus Robinson for the Rams. I know they're on a bye this week, but let's face it, Cooper Kupp's coming back. He's going to find his routes limited, his plays limited. He's done nothing. We thought he was going to be a guy that would replace Kupp, and obviously that is not the case. Tutu Atwell has really stepped up in that role, even though Puka Nacua is out. Puka Nacua should be coming back too, so you can get rid of Demarcus Robinson. And I want to throw somebody else out there. Again, a lot of high expectations coming into the season. Mike Williams of the Jets has done nada. Now, remember, he's coming off a serious knee injury, but that Jet offense is awful. I would get rid of him at this point. He's on my export list, and that is my export list. Mike, we're now, this is week 6 of the NFL season, and I thought it was kind of interesting. Sunday was the longest day, quotes, in NFL history, because it started with the game in London at 9:30, and because of the weather delay in Pittsburgh, it didn't end till after 1 o'clock in the morning. And so, I mean, if you're a football fan, that's a great day. But if you got to get up and work on Monday, that's not a great day. But the thing of it is that it's kind of spurred the talk that the NFL wants to expand the international games. They want to do more of them. And I think it's going to be coincide with the 18-game schedule. They want to do 16 international games. And probably what they'll do is they'll spin them off to one of the networks, probably a streamer. But they want to do that. And so the Sunday morning 9:30 kickoff may become something permanent. I wonder, and I'll ask you this, Mike, from a fantasy perspective, do you want to see that? And also, could you see a game in the United States kicking off at 9:30 in the morning? I'm not saying West Coast, I'm saying East Coast. Like, MetLife, Philadelphia, Washington, New England, Atlanta, Miami, Tampa, I know East Coast in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Could you see that? The NFL doing something like that?
I mean, the NFL, if they're looking to expand and get more viewers, of course, as a football fan, I wouldn't mind waking up and having football in the morning. But of course, and from a fantasy perspective, it makes it a little bit more exciting as well. But also, on the flip side, when you look at it from a fantasy perspective, that's going to set your deadlines and you're going to have to be more prepared. Of course, we get these Sunday games, these international games scattered throughout the year, and they're more earlier in the season than they are later. And of course, we get down later in the season, we'll get the Saturday games as well. So, it's always an adjustment and setting your calendars. From a football perspective, I wouldn't mind it. Of course, again, maybe it's football oversaturation. And, the NFL has been testing the waters with Monday night, with putting 2 games on Monday night. They want to see how the ratings go and the time separation. Of course, I'm not a big fan of the time separation on Monday night with that. I think the NFL needs to figure that situation out. I from a fantasy perspective, you hit a good point about it a couple of weeks ago about how, you wouldn't mind having 2 games because you have the option of playing a player if it, you get late breaking news that one player is out and then you have someone on your roster that could potentially start in that Monday game. That's a good point there. But again, are we oversaturating and are we I don't want to say overkill, but maybe it's just too much. And I mean, as a football fan, I like it, but not everybody would like it.
I agree. I mean, listen, it's not for everybody, but it's something to talk about. Again, week 6, the buys are going to come fast and furious. Keep that in mind. Try and work a week ahead. Again, we say this every year and we constantly preach this. Work a week ahead because look at your schedule next week. You may want to pick up because, again, one of the things about waiting till the week of is there may be a hot defense or a hot kicker that for some reason hits the waiver wire. I think it was in one of the leagues you and I are in together. Did you see somebody waived Harrison Butker?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm sitting there and I'm like, are you kidding me?
No. Yeah.
Are you serious? So, but again, he's on a bye this week. But I think at this point, I'll go grab Harrison Butker. And again, but part of it is people are doing it because they're not they're not planning ahead. They're not thinking. And that's why we're here to help you. We're trying to give you the advice that we follow. And you say, well, you're not winning every game. Well, listen, that's why they play the games. But
yep.
I think we know what we're doing. A couple people think we know what we're doing. Of course, my one fantasy team, I'm 2-3, so I posted on the message board. I am firing myself as coach, just like the New York Jets. And I immediately had somebody else in the league say, I'll hire you as my coach. Okay.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Again, being somewhat facetious, but that's, listen, we have a little fun, with the Fantasy Sultans. We do this thing. We do it for you every week. I want to remind you also about the podcast I do. It's called Tripp's Take. It is on Spotify for podcasters and YouTube. Just search for Tripp's Take. By the way, forgot to mention again, Fantasy Sultans also on the radio on Sundays. Right. Michael, tell us how they can listen.
Yeah, we are on Fox Sports Radio New Jersey, Fox Sports Radio Jersey Shore, 93.5 FM, 1450 AM in Central Jersey, and then, of course, at the Jersey Shore on 100.5, 100.1 HD3, 95.9 HD3. You can check us out Sunday with the Fantasy Sultans, Sunday at noon.
Also, if you like the music of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, you can give a listen to WTRSradio.com. We're here to help. As we always say, we're givers. We're giving you the knowledge we possess you need to win your fantasy football league. There's a reason why he's the Hall of Famer, and I'm Tripp Rogers. Mike Scheck, by the way. We are the Fantasy Sultans.
And you are not.